10 days made this list, starting with a boot print on the moon. I'll tell you which one I'd call the best. It is not the one you'd guess. And the last one is not history yet. It is still happening right now. Day 1, the moon landing. You already know the date. Feel it for 1 second. The 20th of July, 1969. The Sea of Tranquility. 650 million people watching one small screen. Getting here had already cost lives. 2.5 years earlier, a fire on the launch pad had killed 3 astronauts in a rehearsal. They never made it out of the capsule. That was the price already paid. And America was never sure it wanted to pay it. In most polls that decade, fewer than half of Americans thought the moon was worth the cost. 39% in the best year said they would pay anything at all. On the night itself, 5 alarms flash on the way down. Boulders fill the exact landing spot. Armstrong takes the controls himself. In mission control, a 26-year-old has 27 seconds to rule on each alarm. The landing software sheds its minor tasks instead of crashing. The room believes he has 25 seconds of fuel. It is closer to 50. He flies past the boulders and sets it down. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. I do not think we went to the moon because we were noble. I think we went because we were frightened, and the fear is what paid for it. That does not make the footprint any smaller to me. And that footprint is still the furthest from home a human being has ever stood. I'll take you back 66 years, to a cold beach where nobody had managed it yet. Day 2, Kitty Hawk. You would think the moment that ended, the ground would look bigger than this. Men had died trying this. The greatest glider pilot alive was killed by a crosswind 7 years before. The story says his last words were about the cost of trying. Probably not true, but every pioneer before them believed it anyway. 10:35 in the morning, the 17th of December. Orville flies 120 feet in 12 seconds, about 10 feet off the sand. 5 people watch. 3 more flights follow that same morning. The last one, Wilbur's, covers 852 feet in 59 seconds. That afternoon, a gust flips the machine over and it never flies again. The brothers spend the next 9 years in court, defending their patent through 12 major lawsuits. Rival builders joked the rights would sue any man who jumped and waved his arms. By 1917, the country that invented flight has no acceptable American aircraft of its own, and its pilots fly French machines into the First World War. What gets me is that inventing a thing and owning a thing turned out to be 2 completely different jobs, and the second one is the one that ate the men who did the first. That machine broke on a beach that same afternoon, and almost nobody noticed. Something much bigger is about to break, and this time the whole world will notice at once. Germany surrendered twice. Day 3, VE Day. Once at Reims, just before 3 in the morning on the 7th of May. Again in Berlin the following night, with all fighting ordered to stop at 1 minute past 11. Close to 100,000 people packed the streets around Buckingham Palace by that afternoon. Under that crowd, though, the country had lost about 450,000 people in the war, some 67,000 of them civilians. Every photograph of that celebration has someone in it with nothing to come home to. Churchill's own 3 o'clock broadcast confirmed victory in Europe, and in the very same breath said plainly that the fighting in Asia continued. That same month, he quietly ordered his own military planners to draft a plan for a surprise attack on Soviet positions, using as many as 47 Allied divisions, with a hypothetical start date barely 3 weeks away. You'll never convince me anybody in charge actually believed that war was over. I think they believed they were between wars. The crowd got the day. The planners already had the next one. That balcony held one kind of relief in front of 100,000 people. The next kind of relief on this list arrives almost unnoticed and ends up saving far more lives. Day 4, the polio vaccine. Rows of steel cylinders line a hospital hallway, a child's head resting on a small pillow at the open end of each one, angled mirrors above so each child can see the room behind them. This is what a parent was afraid of before you even hear the word that ends it. 10:20 in the morning, the 12th of April, 1955, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Dr. Thomas Francis declares the vaccine safe, effective, and potent, exactly 10 years to the day after President Roosevelt, polio's most famous survivor, died. Nearly 2 million children had already volunteered for the trial that proved it. 13 days after the rollout begins, polio starts appearing in children who had just been vaccinated. One laboratory had released doses that still contained live virus. The count is disputed. At least 40,000 infected, roughly 200 left with paralysis, 10 dead, by the most widely cited number. A fuller reconstruction puts the number far higher. The Surgeon General halts the entire program 3 weeks after the bells rang. What follows is not glamorous. A permanent testing committee, federal safety standards, 400 million safe doses after. Asked that same day who owned the patent, the doctor who made the vaccine said only this: "There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?" What I keep coming back to is this: the day something works isn't the end of the danger. It's the start of the boring work that makes it safe. And it's the boring work, not the miracle, that actually saved the children. Later that same year, a long way south, somebody decided she was finished waiting. Day 5. Rosa Parks stays seated. You know her as the woman who wouldn't move. I want to give her the job title first. She was secretary of the local NAACP chapter, arrested on the 1st of December 1955. The boycott that followed ran 381 days, a number people never remember once they know the ending. 9 months earlier, a 15-year-old named Claudette Colvin did the exact same thing first. Her case was quietly set aside, and the deciding factor was not her age. It was that she was pregnant and unmarried. The bill lands on 2 people, not 1. Parks loses her tailoring job. Her husband is fired a week later. The family takes regular death threats, leaves Alabama for Detroit in 1957, and loses their apartment 2 years after that. Bus segregation itself falls in a different case, Colvin one of the plaintiffs who won it. Colvin died in Texas this January, aged 86, 4 years after a judge finally cleared her record. Even a just movement has to cast its lead, and I think the casting bill always lands on a real person. Colvin paid hers for 70 years. That was 1 seat on 1 bus. 8 years before that bus, on the far side of the planet, the argument was not 1 seat. It was where a whole country ended, and the clock was running. Day 6. India's midnight. The 15th of August, 1947, in Delhi, a tricolor flag rises over a great red sandstone fort. Then, at a microphone at midnight, a single voice. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. The date itself had been moved up by roughly 10 months, decided in a single announcement made back in June. A British barrister who had never once set foot in India arrived that July with about 5 weeks to divide an entire country using nothing but old maps and census data. The new border was withheld and not published until 2 days later. The country celebrated its independence on the Friday and found out where its own borders actually were on the Sunday. The toll, honestly, is a range nobody can close, somewhere between 200,000 and 2 million dead, up to 20 million people displaced. You'll notice who never pays the bill for a rushed exit, not the men who set the date. It's paid by people who found out on a Sunday which country their house was suddenly in. 1 clock got moved up by 10 months, and a whole country had to live with the difference overnight. Now go back further than any date on this list has reached yet, to a clock that had already been running for 300 years. Day 7. Emancipation Day. Rows of small figures laid out side by side, drawn to scale inside the outline of a ship's hold. No date yet, just the plan itself. The 1st of August, 1834. More than 800,000 people freed by law across the Caribbean and beyond. Say that number first, because everything after it is going to complicate it. 20 million pounds. Roughly 40% of the entire Treasury's yearly spending, paid out to the owners. The people who had actually been enslaved were bound as, quote, apprentices to those same former owners for 4 to 6 more years after that. More than 40,000 separate payments went out to roughly 46,000 owners. The single largest payment on record went to a man named John Gladstone, the father of a future prime minister. I want to be precise here, because it is easy to get this one wrong. That borrowed money was folded into a much later government debt instrument, and it was not provably paid off in full until 2015. I think Britain didn't so much abolish slavery as buy it out, and part of that purchase price got charged to the very people being freed. 800,000 people still walked out the door free. Both of those things are true, and I don't think you get to keep just one. That's a debt this list refuses to resolve into one tidy number. A century and a half later, a state would spend one whole night quietly losing control of itself. Day 8. The Berlin Wall. That hammer from the very start of this list. Here's the order that let it swing. A government spokesman reads new travel rules at a press conference, rules he had not properly read, and says they take effect immediately. 10 or 20 people show up at one checkpoint first. Within hours, the crowd is 10,000. An officer named Harold Yeager phones his colonel, is told to stop bothering him. Getting no one willing to take responsibility, he raises the barrier himself. No order was ever given. I'd bet the best days in history are usually the days a bad order simply didn't get given. Not luck. A lot of people quietly deciding they won't be the one who does it. One gate opened because nobody with the authority to open it was willing to. The next door on this list stayed shut for 27 years, and the man on the wrong side of it had been there a long time. Day 9. Mandela Walks Out. You already assume this day went exactly the way he wanted. It didn't, not even the timing. South Africa's president unbans the ANC, the Banned Liberation Movement, on the 2nd of February. On the 10th, de Klerk tells Mandela he'll be released tomorrow. Mandela asks for 2 weeks. He's refused. He walks out at 16:14, hand in hand with Winnie, after 27 years, having expected only 20 or 30 guards from his own section there to thank personally. The crowd makes that impossible. He never sees them. That evening, he speaks to about 50,000 people from a city hall balcony. Here's what nobody films. The 4 years after that photograph killed about 14,000 people, the rate climbing hard in the final 10 months before the election. I think that's where the hard part actually starts. We remember the gate because a gate is easy to film. That day, the hard part started the moment the cameras left. The next day on this list is the exact opposite kind of day. No cameras there to begin with, and almost nobody found out anything had happened at all. Day 10, the day nothing happened. A dark console room. A red word on the board. One officer. One telephone. Just after midnight, Moscow time, the 26th of September, 1983. The system reports a missile launch, then 4 more. Stanislav Petrov, on shift by chance, calls it a malfunction and waits. 3 weeks earlier, that same military had shot down a civilian airliner. That is why the screen was believable. The cause, once known, sunlight off high cloud. He waited 23 minutes to learn he was right. He was not decorated. He was reprimanded over his paperwork, and the whole thing stayed secret for 15 years. For my money, the best day of the 20th century is the day nothing happened at all. The man who made it nothing got written up for his paperwork. A system that can't see a save keeps punishing the people who make one. The smallest entry on this list, the last one, is the opposite, the biggest by far, and the one I held back until now. A child's face and chest, covered in dense round pustules, looking straight at the camera. Before the word, look at this. Ali Mau Malin was a hospital cook in Merka, Somalia. He had worked as a vaccinator himself, but he had never been vaccinated. He caught the disease after riding in a car with 2 infected children, and he survived. He is the last natural case of this disease in human history. Smallpox killed about 300 million people in the 20th century alone, after roughly 3,000 years living alongside our species. The last natural case survived. But the last person this disease actually killed was Janet Parker, a medical photographer in Birmingham, whose darkroom sat 1 floor above the laboratory that infected her. She died on the 11th of September, 1978. Days later, the professor running that laboratory took his own life in his garden shed. His laboratory had already failed its safety inspection. The accident came after the warning. A global commission certified eradication on the 9th of December, 1979. The World Health Assembly declared on the 8th of May, 1980, that the world and all its peoples had won freedom from smallpox. About $300 million was spent. More than $1 billion has been saved every year since. And then, the freezer from the start of this list. Every known stock of the virus was destroyed, or moved into 2 laboratories. The freezers are real, and they are still there. If you ask me, this is the one thing our species has ever actually finished. We finished it, and it still took 1 more person on the way out, because of us. Then we kept a copy. I can't think of anything more human than that. I told you earlier I'd say which day I actually think is the best. The day nothing happened gets my honest runner-up. But this is the one that stayed good, for 46 years and counting, and that's why it wins. 4 months ago, 4 astronauts flew around the moon for the first time since 1972. And the bill from 1834 is still being argued about in Britain today, this very year. So tell me, which one of these would you not have believed if I'd told you before you clicked? And should we destroy what's left in those 2 freezers, or keep it? I genuinely don't know. What's the next thing we could actually finish? Subscribe if you want to find out. See you next time.